Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Titanic Talks. It is Monday, May 3rd, 2021, and we are glowy today, aren't we? Glowy and sneezy. I know there's going to be sneezes in this one, so buckle up. I can feel one brewing, but say if you look at the light, it'll stop it. Wow. Can you believe it? May 3rd. As of the recording of this video, Dogecoin is at 42 cents per coin. And I'm excited about that because we're about to hit yet another milestone, another all-time high, and I have lots of them. So let's all do our collective crossing of fingers that we keep on climbing today, and we just keep on riding that ride. It's a very exciting time as far as the cryptocurrencies go. Ethereum, how about that one? Pardon me. Struggling out here. I'm used to no weather, and with weather comes sneezes. We've had a significant amount of pollen, and that is having an influence on my entire body. But yeah, Ethereum's doing great. But I got in pretty early. 2014, I think, was my first foray into the cryptos, and it's been quite a ride. So if you're new to it, I mean, the roller coaster, that's normal. All over the place. And does any of it make any sense whatsoever? No. But I like the to me, it's more about the principle and the long term as far as transactions in the future will be, I guess, conducted. So, as my mother would say, April showers bring May flowers. And what do Mayflowers bring? The answer to that is pilgrims. And that is why I'm dressed like a pilgrim. Kind of like maybe more Amish. Somewhere along those lines. Really, really not sure what's going on as far as wardrobe goes. For accessibility for our visually impaired. I have a hat on, a black Stetson hat, which is it's an Amish hat. Let's be real. And some sort of, I found this on the internet. It's a white shirt with a nice floral embroidery, and it invokes a certain amount of spring feeling. It's summery. Maybe something flowy you would wear outside while perusing maybe a mountainous, hilly landscape. And I liked it. And so I'm wearing it. And I'm really excited about I opened up the lens just a little bit, almost a full stop. For those of us who are familiar with with photography or how lenses work, aperture, etc. This anamorphic lens that I shoot these on, it is fully manual. So you have a nice smooth focus and aperture ring, so you can get your in between f-stops. And I thought, I started these videos off visually a bit darker. I was shooting at about an f4, and I'm almost to an f3 now. as I feel, maybe this is just me, but I feel as though they've become a little bit more lighthearted in tone as I've become more comfortable talking. And it might be a good idea to visually communicate that, which is why I've decided to open the aperture up ever so slightly to give us a nice glow. And that's influenced by the I've had a couple people ask about the look of these, and lots of the stuff that I do. And back before I realized that it's pointless to hoard information out of fear of just someone else having something look similar. And I used to get I was insecure about that. And so all of my kind of tricks that I learned along the way, I didn't feel comfortable like sharing that information. But at this point, I'm at the point where I think that that information is, well, first of all, it's freely available on the internet, but it's better for everyone to talk about the things that have been helpful for me to get things to look or sound a little bit better. And I would say that kind of something that's really changed the game for me is using filters. And so I think one being anamorphic lens, really of any sort of anamorphic lens, if you can get your hands on it and play around with it, and you'll find that they tend to handle light in a very interesting way. And then when you put filters in front of those lenses, in this case, it is a 1/2 black pro mist filter, which is a bit almost like a diffusion. It's kind of actually hard to describe exactly what it does, but for me, it makes things seem a bit dreamy, I guess you might say. And I use the Black Pro Mist so much now that footage just kind of looks weird to me when I don't have it on there. If I wanted something like super crisp and I guess HD looking, I would shoot without it. But when it comes to things looking slightly more cinematic, which is something that I tend to enjoy thoroughly, the Pro Mist, the Black Pro Mist is it'll get you there. And so that's something that you might be able to use. They're relatively inexpensive. Just make sure you get the right thread, the right lens thread, assuming you're not using a matte box or anything like that. And I think it'll do you some good. I think I got mine for maybe it was like, I don't know, $80, maybe $100, something like that. But I tend to like those sorts of things. It's kind of a in the same wheelhouse, I guess, as like using. I look at lenses almost like in the same way I use guitar pedals, running like my synthesizers through pedals first to just. In music production, we would say like when you have like when you have a sound in your recording that you're comfortable with and you know you're not going to touch it outside of like EQs and compression, maybe you would call it like printing. Let's print that take or that track. Which basically you're conforming a collection of sounds, or you're committing to something. And in this case, I couldn't really necessarily take off the filter later, so it's a bit of a decision in the creative process to commit to. And those can be especially when you're first trying things out, those can be really daunting, I guess you would say. But that's where, especially if you're in a collaborative sort of creative mode, it's good to have people. You never want to be the smartest person in the room. You know what I mean? So that being said, I learned about the Black Pearl Mist filter from my dear friend and incredibly talented director of photography, Bryant Jansen, who I miss dearly, but we talk, and he's doing very well. And if you're watching this, chances are you've seen some of his work, because I guess for about 5 years now, maybe 6 years, I've worked with him pretty much exclusively. And that's a rare thing, to find someone long term that you just totally click with. And what I found working with him was he was one of the first people who could pretty much read my mind. And usually when you're making something that's a bit intricate, especially if there's a lot of camera moves and a lot involved in the sense of outlandish, out there ideas that are kind of hard to communicate before you actually shoot it. And that's why like storyboarding becomes very important a lot of the time. And the first time we ever sat down to kind of imagine what the first music video would be that we were going to do together, he kind of did a rough sketch of the main setups that I was looking to do that I had described in the treatment. And it was exactly what I was imagining. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And it's even better when it's one of the coolest people ever. And, I've said it before on here, but long term, that's the most important part. It really is about, if you're looking to get into directing, or I would say this goes with music production as well, the relationships that you build along the way are not only the most valuable, and I guess maybe rewarding aspect of getting into a creative line of work like directing or music production, songwriting, that kind of stuff. But also as you kind of build a team and you get your family together for creating things, that kind of becomes the foundation of the structure of your career, I guess you would say. And you'll find throughout, most production teams that I admire kind of do it that way too. And when you really, if you've watched a movie a million times, like I've seen Pulp Fiction probably, maybe more than any other movie. And with Tarantino, for example, Sally Menke, who was his longtime editor, cut all of his movies, edited all of his movies. And she, unfortunately, several years ago passed away. And I believe Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I think, was the first movie. It might have been Hateful Eight, but it's kind of weird. You can almost feel that something changed. And she was really one of my earliest influences as far as editing goes, rhythm. And I've always said, like, producing a song is kind of like editing a movie. And really, mixing a song is like editing a movie, because you're deciding what happens and when. With music, if, let's say, you finish the verse and there's singing happening, and then you go into kind of like a musical interlude, in a mix, whatever the musical interlude is, let's say it's a synthesizer part, the engineer, or whoever's mixing it, will then lift that part to highlight the synthesizer part to kind of take the place of what the vocal was doing before that, right? Just to kind of put a spotlight on whatever's happening at any given time. And it's the same thing with editing, like editing a movie. Sometimes, a fraction of a second can make all the difference. And I think editors like Sally Menke's a great example. We're just hanging on, to a shot or cutting to a reaction at just the right time can really invoke the emotion that the story is portraying. You see this a lot with comedy. I think one of the most brilliant examples actually is Napoleon Dynamite, which, if for some reason you haven't seen that, I'd put that in one of the most influential movies that I've ever seen. And the editing is just so hilarious. And I've noticed in my experience, at least in working in Hollywood, there is I suppose, a reverence for a more traditional style of editing, which is kind of what I lean towards. I guess you could say the same for music as well. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And a lot of the greatest movies and albums to ever come out are, in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And, at that time, because they were in the instance of editing a movie, there were no computers, and you would have to use a razor blade and tape. And those were your cuts. So that kind of influenced, in my opinion, things like the two-shot, which is if you're not familiar with that, like quite literally, if this is the frame right here, one person here and one person here, two people in the shot. And I find for like comedy, for example, that is a way better and funnier way to communicate an idea, because you get to see the action and the reaction in the same frame, just like real life. And, if you're, let's say you're with two friends and they're, one friend is kind of, jokingly picking on the other friend, you're not exclusively just looking at one person, and then you're not just exclusively looking at the other person. You're kind of, through your kind of micro eye movements, you're taking in the entire scene. And the reason I say that is because now with like digital editing, which has been, it's just the way things are made now. And I get it. It's so much more efficient and easier. But I find that there is nowadays, and this could be argued, I understand, But nowadays there's a huge tendency to, especially with kind of contemporary or modern comedy movies, where it's just the one person in the shot and they tell the joke, and then it cuts to the other person and you get their reaction. And to me, it feels like you're being force-fed when to laugh. And that is 100% influenced by The Office, in my opinion, which is an okay show. I'm going to be that guy. I apologize, but I loved the UK version, or the British Office. I just thought it was so smart, and it lent itself more, which, I guess you would say British comedy is a little smarter than American comedy, as far as allowing the viewer to digest the joke, right? It's not always glaringly obvious, and there's nowhere I've been, at least in the world, that comes close to British wit. And that's just it comes with the culture, I guess you would say. And I tend to think that is very, very funny. But you'll find and this was my initial gripe when The Office first came out, in the Steve Carell version, the US version, where, a joke happens and then they edit and then you cut into the person looking at the camera. And to this day, I still watch that and I can hear the editor saying, "Time to laugh." And that kind of replaced the laugh track. Because in the 90s, especially with shows like Seinfeld and Friends, that it was the same kind of thing. The laugh track comes on. And if you've ever been in one of those studios before, and I'm sure you've probably seen it, they still have them at Saturday Night Live, where it physically tells the audience to laugh, when to laugh. And that's a very... even as a youngster, I kind of thought that was a little cheese to me, at least. I get it. Seinfeld and Friends, they're amazing. The writing on those is really funny. And Seinfeld, one of the best shows ever made. So that's kind of an interesting thing to think about as far as, behind the scenes and production. And that's just for comedy. And my philosophy, and I guess, for people watching this, they probably, I would think you probably understand, I'm a little bit, I like to let the viewer be engaged and kind of with what I do. I like to let the viewer decide if it's even funny to begin with, because I think a lot of things that I find hilarious, many don't. I find humor in interesting places, I think you might say, and that'll get you in trouble for sure. But comedy, it's subjective, just like music or anything else. And I'm conscious and aware of the fact that The Office is regarded as one of the greatest shows of all time. It's okay. To be honest, I think I've probably seen 1.5 full episodes. So I apologize to the diehards out there. And I can see why. And I guess historically at this point, because it's been so long since it came out. That just completely transformed television, really, and had a massive influence. I don't know if that was the one, but as far as I can tell, I'm not a genius when it comes to this kind of thing, so forgive me, but to my estimation, that was like the nail in the coffin for the laugh track. I could be wrong about that. And I've always kind of looked at it as like, well, that was the a big influence on editing becoming easier. You know, the classic, one of my favorite quotes ever. In the studios, you know what they had before Pro Tools? They had Pros, and that goes for all forms of creative media for sure. And you know, you watch a lot of, I guess, classic comedies, and you see that two-shot a lot, and I love that philosophy, because though it may be arguably less aesthetically satisfying, potentially, I find that it becomes more about the performance. And I mean, some of these classic comedies, it's almost like the director just called action, and then, you know, just point a camera, you know. Peter Sellers. Peter Sarsgaard's good too. But Peter Sellers, I mean, wow. How do you even direct someone like that? Or I guess, you know, for a more contemporary version, totally different dude, but I mean, Jim Carrey, you know, like, I can only imagine what it's like to direct him. You know, okay, action, he does his thing. Yeah, I guess try it a different way. Like, you know, it's like, well, you pretty much just point a camera at him, and it's amazing. And that must have been so much fun making some of those movies with either, you know, Peter Sellers or Jim Carrey. I always loved Chevy Chase. I mean, I love Christmas Vacation. I mean, I watch that movie like crazy every year, and he's just legendary, just incredibly funny, and you know, it makes me wonder, like, who will be the next, you know. I guess that's a good question for everyone here. Who do you think is the comedy great of today? I mean, I think it's always evolving. If I had to pick one, I would probably say Danny McBride, where the first time I saw him, it was just like a completely new kind of funny. And it just absolutely blew me away. You know, Eastbound and Down, I think, is probably his maybe in my favorite of his performances, but still, it's kind of a different thing. I found myself even watching like Eastbound and Down, kind of wishing I would see more of the two-shot, just classic comedy, because that's something I've learned working with a lot of comedians over the years. That's kind of something that I don't focus or dwell on how the collective or I guess like general audience perceives the things that I make, you know, and as I think like creative people, it's not our responsibility, or it shouldn't be a concern of ours to you know, focus on how the things we make are interpreted, because I have always seen what I do as comedy. And I think that's why, at least when I was living in Los Angeles, though I hung out with a lot of musicians, I would say probably I hung out with comedians just as much. And I felt like I was kind of accepted in that community, because I think maybe a lot of them saw the humor in kind of what I was doing. But I kind of, for a very long time, I still do kind of sometimes, but I would sell it, or yeah, that's the right word for it. I would sell it as dramatic, or, you know, spooky or interesting. But that's just kind of one of those things, you know, you get wrapped up in it when it kind of starts happening, and a lot of people are watching. And to me, it was like getting into a flow state. I didn't even have time to think about what I was doing when things were really going crazy. And the vortex of success was happening. So I was just in a full-on flow state. But something I kind of, I guess, forgot is, if you take away, and this goes for just about everything I've ever made, but because I do usually almost all of, I guess you would say, maybe the style of videos that I do, almost all of them are, I do all of the audio in post. So everything, ADR, they call it, but basically like voiceover. And then I'll put like ominous music. But if you listen to the raw, you know, if you look at the raw footage and you listen to the raw sound, usually I have music playing, and it's all laughs, you know. And that's weird to me, because of, you know, hundreds of millions of people have watched or seen, you know, some of, a variety of, I guess, videos, at least that I've kind of made. And nobody, except for the people there, have seen like the behind the scenes, and which was always very lighthearted and fun. And so looking back and seeing like all like the conspiracy videos that people made about all the stuff that, and you know, if you only see that end of it, I totally get it. It's like, oh man, these people must be like really weird. And that's why it's hilarious making these videos. And like the clip I put out about the 336 thing, you know, it's like, it's been long enough, you know? And we were just having a lot of fun, like a lot of fun. And that kind of ties into what I was talking about with, like, I consider it comedy. And it was very perplexing, I have to say, to see that it was being taken seriously. But that was even more funny to me. Like, that was 10 times funnier. Like, oh, oh, okay. And then like all the Illuminati stuff started happening, and it's just like, oh man, you do believe. Okay, so let's go even more into it. And you know, it was a lot of fun. It was like a playground. And so much of it was just so lighthearted. And you know, I think that's why, like, kind of again with the parallel of comedy, you know, you get like a very controversial, a comedian can get away with saying very, very controversial things. And there are a lot of comedians that I listen to who, like, you can't cancel them, because there's almost like a collectively understood, like, oh, but that's a comedian, they tell jokes. And I don't know, maybe that was kind of a delusion that I had, because I was hanging around with all these, like, you know, well-known comedians, and I felt included in that. But I never came out and said, like, hey, these are, like, this is like full on. We're mocking an entire industry, and we're mocking these people who just lose their minds, and and then it happens in real life. But I think maybe there's something to that. I don't know. Maybe there's like maybe that's why it clicked. And so, almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I don't know. It is kind of weird to talk about in a format like this, at least, because there was a time, at least when the rocket ship really took off, it was like just trying to stay behind the curtain and not reveal the magic trick, which, it's the whole when the snowball effect is happening, it's just like you gotta make sure that there's enough snow down the hill to keep the ball getting big. But ultimately the snowball gets to the bottom of the hill and ultimately melts. I thought the ball would just keep rolling. But as they say, all good things have endings. I wish I would have been able to put more of a button, at least on kind of like the project as a whole, because there was so much more that I was hoping to do with it. And for the audience, at least, that's where I felt pretty bad, and still kind of do, honestly. There was no like I wasn't able to like finish the arc that was kind of written out for it. But that's just that's life, isn't it? That is life. Weird to think, I think tomorrow I'm going to go buy a new skateboard, a new Complete. Someone asked me in a comment, they asked if I skateboard. Yes, I believe if you've ever skated, you're a skater. And I must have started when I was maybe 12 or 13. And I always thought it was cool, but it wasn't until there was a game for PlayStation, the original PlayStation, Thrasher Skate and Destroy, I think it was called. And I played that a lot, and I loved the music in it. And the music in that game was very, really, that's what got me into hip hop. And well, I do remember I had a neighbor when I was probably in first grade, and they had a cassette of Doggy Style, Snoop Dogg. And the artwork on it was very suggestive. And so it was kind of like you had to sneak out and you would look at the artwork and then listen to the music, and it was just like, whoa. That was kind of, I guess, the first, but that was West Coast, which is, especially in the early 90s, even as a kid, I could tell kind of the difference of sonically, East Coast and West Coast were very different things. So when I started playing video games, and then like the Thrasher game had a bunch of East Coast hip hop, and it was a very, very different thing. And I'd have to look at the soundtrack and kind of see what was going on there. But it's funny how video games could kind of do that, and I guess maybe they still do. A lot of, at least the games that I played, a lot of them it's original music, and it's very like orchestral and epic sounding. But it used to be, I think it was maybe because budgets for video games were nowhere near what they are now. And so they would just like license songs. That's how I found out about Prodigy. You know, that got me into, I mean, geez, one of the bigger influences on things that I've made. You know, The Fat of the Land, the Prodigy album, Wipeout, or was it Wipeout XL? I can't remember, but yeah, that I think there was a couple Prodigy songs on that. That was original PlayStation. I was probably in like 4th grade, maybe 3rd or 4th grade when that came out, and suddenly I'm listening to this, like, I was exposed to like all this new music that was just like completely mind blowing. I remember just thinking like, this sounds like the future. This is crazy. But anyway, back to skating. Yeah, the Thrasher game I was super into, and then Tony Hawk's Pro Skater came out, and it was just like game over. My friend who lived down the street gave me a just kind of like a, you know, a little cheap board. And I learned how to ollie and learned how to kickflip and this and that. And then another friend kind of noticed, he was a skater and he lived around the neighborhood, and he noticed that I was taking a liking to it and actually learning a lot of tricks. And he was kind enough to give me my first real board, because the first one I had, I think it was called a Veriflex. It was like a Walmart board, basically. The grip tape was like actual sandpaper. It wasn't a fine grit, and it was probably like, I don't know, 15 plies or something like that. It was very thick, and, you know, plastic trucks and the whole deal. But most of, at that time, I was just standing still and learning how to ollie and kickflip and shove it and all that stuff. But my friend, he gave me, he got a new board. He gave me a Girl board. And Girl became my favorite skate company, because then I saw the videos, and that is what exposed me to Spike Jonze. And, you know, from there, it was just, skateboarding really was my intro to cinema, really, and let's say filmmaking. Because I always, you know, as a kid, I was lucky enough to have a camcorder, and I would make little things, but I would edit in camera, and it just coincided, especially as I started to get more into skateboarding, and I would always record, you know, learning tricks, and I would go and watch back. But, you know, it got to a point where I wanted to edit them together, and I was lucky enough that we had a computer in the house that had Media 100 on an Apple G3. Yeah, it was the beige G3. So this is like OS 7, maybe OS 8, long time ago. But Media 100 is just a very old NLE, non-linear editor, computer editing, basically. And my friends and I we got better and better at skating. I got more comfortable with the cameras and how they worked. And so I learned how to digitize footage, and I wanted to get all the clips together. And that's how I learned how to edit. And then I would go to the skate shop and get the old VHS, you know, tapes. Like, I mean, Shorty's Fulfill the Dream was kind of, I probably wore that thing out watching Muska's part. And, yeah, Alien Workshop's Photosynthesis, and then all the Transworld videos. Yeah, those were kind of like the early ones that really got me into it. And I wanted to do that, make skate parts and stuff. And so, you know, my friends and I would pick a song, and then I would edit all of our parts together, and that got me familiar with editing to the beat, because you would want the trick to pop or land on the beat. And that's kind of how I got into making music videos, because there's a rhythm, obviously, to cutting a music video. So once it came time for me to to edit my own music videos, I had already edited thousands of hours of just like skateboard clips and stuff. But that was looking back, skateboarding was the thing that, it was the straw that broke the camel's back, because most of the skate videos, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was like they're very crude, and they weren't very fancy. But every once in a while, like in like Fulfill the Dream, but definitely Alien Workshop, their like the VHS tape itself was orange. I thought that was really cool, and I loved their graphic design and just kind of like it was out there, and I thought it was really cool. I used to skate. Well, Girl, I've always skated. I've always loved. And their videos they were just amazing, because they had, Spike Jonze was heavily involved in them. But also, the Alien Workshop video, they would use like Super 8 cameras or 16 millimeter cameras. And I remember thinking as a kid, I didn't realize the difference between formats, because all the skate parts, because, it would take you a long time to get the trick right. You couldn't just burn through all that film. But they would have these kind of interludes that would use motion picture film. And I remember just thinking like, that looks so cool. What is that? And I got really, really, really into it. And then the girl videos were always kind of my favorite. They were just kind of a step above as far as like aesthetic, I guess. And that led me to getting the DVD of Spike Jonze, his like anthology of work, and it had all of his music videos. And that was it for me. And I had one for Chris Cunningham and Michel Gondry. And I just obsessed over those in high school, and, just learned everything I could. And at the same time, I was being exposed to all of this just incredible music from around the world. Because remember, at the time, I'm an old timer, so we didn't have Spotify, and so you kind of had to have a cool friend who would tell you about, tell you what to listen to, tell you what's up. That was kind of like playlisting back in the day, is just having a cool friend or a skate video. That was where most of my early kind of discovery in music came from, and some of my, that's like how I found out about Radiohead. Well, one of my favorite Radiohead songs, at least, which was Jason Dill's part on Photosynthesis, which he used a B-side from OK Computer. I believe it was from OK Computer, but Polyethylene is the song. If you haven't heard that and you're a Radiohead fan, well, you've probably heard it if you're a Radiohead fan, but if you haven't heard that song, it's just awesome. Plastic plaid, middle class poly. Yeah, really out there. Plastic plaid, middle class polyethylene. All right, that's a lyric. Tom York's a genius. And so fast forward to May 3rd, 2021, and my, YouTube, the algorithm will, if you click a video on accident, something totally random, macaroni and cheese, whatever. You know how the next time you refresh your page, your entire feed or every other like third video is going to be something about macaroni and cheese. I think I was like looking for a clip from an old skate video. Like there's a song I was looking for or something like that. And this is maybe like a month ago, and just progressively, I keep getting more and more of these clips, and I am just loving where skateboarding is at right now. It's so interesting because, when I kind of stopped for a while, I've always had a skateboard, and that was, for people who've been following me for a while, you probably remember like, in the Vine days when that was a thing, almost every day I would post a Vine just skateboarding down Hollywood Boulevard, down the Walk of Fame, which you're not supposed to do, but the ground is so smooth, and it's just the perfect skateboard feeling, the texture. And LA is relatively hilly, so from where I lived, I was like almost into Los Feliz, but very, very close to the Walk of Fame, a couple blocks away when I lived in Hollywood. And, I would just push once and it was a slightly downhill and you could just cruise all the way. And that was really fun for me. And, we used to skate quite a bit, my buddies and I, when I first got to LA, and just, it's kind of, it got to the point where skateboarding got so crazy where it was just like everyone was like tray flipping like these huge gaps and huge stairs, and just like the rail stuff got so crazy. Like there was a time, this is my opinion again, there's a time when like Eric Costin was kind of like the rail king, I guess you would say. But it was new, and it was just like, someone's actually doing this, but it got to the point where everyone was doing it and everyone was so good. And I almost feel like that was a part of why I kind of lost interest. It was like, it got too big, I guess. And it wasn't until recently I discovered there's kind of a new philosophy, I guess if you look for it, where it's just, I just love real basic, just cruising stuff, and people like, dive bombing a hill or just like doing a pop shove it like off a curb, I guess like more like stuff like I can do. And all these kids now are getting into like these cameras that were around, when I was a kid, the VX 1000, like that was like the skate camera. And it's hilarious to me that people are like spending way too much money on these like, what I would probably consider obsolete cameras, but I get it. There's a look to it, and there's an authenticity, and that was an amazing camera. But anyway, sorry if this is boring to you and you don't care about skateboarding, but that's just kind of where my head's at, because I'm about to go. I realized being in Texas, I was like, oh man, I left my skateboard. Well, not intentionally. It's in a storage unit somewhere in Burbank. That's a whole other story. Along with most of my possessions anyways, but my skateboard, I don't have it. And I realized, I really want to go skate. And so I'm just going to get a new one. So we'll see what happens with that. I thought it might be funny to put a little part together. Maybe I'll get some tricks on camera, because I spent a long time and a lot of hours obsessed with skateboarding, and it's hilarious because it kind of went on the back burner, and filmmaking and music kind of took over. And I don't know. It's kind of one of those things. Also, too, I'm just like, I realized I'm not. I need to have like a focus when I'm doing some sort of like outdoor activity, right? And I actually enjoy playing basketball, and I love baseball, but it's just kind of right now. You kind of gotta, for the most part, do activities that don't involve large groups of people. So I'm like, I used to skate alone all the time. And so I think that's what I'm going to do. Watch the next week. I'll have a big cast and a broken arm because I tried to tray flip a 3-stair, because that's pretty much all I can do. No. Fun times. Yeah. It really is funny to look back and see kind of those moments that struck, they reached a tipping point, or caused a tipping point. And, my whole life as a kid, there was cameras around. I loved making like little movies. And I always knew, I knew right from the jump what I was going to do. And, going through it was weird for me going through school, especially high school, because inevitably there's going to be that moment. For us, they kind of had these, like, they called them guidance counselors. And I don't know if they have any, at least in where I went to school, I don't know if there was any training for that, because I remember going to these meetings in high school and they were just like, oh yeah, you just gotta like go to college and just they would like look at like one, like your standardized test scores or something like that, and based on like one paper, this person who you don't know, they're telling you what you should do with your life. And I remember them telling me like, oh yeah, you should go something with like engineering or something like that. And I remember just being like, what? And especially at that time, I just always knew, like, yeah, I'm gonna figure out a way to make this music stuff work, and it'll probably have something to do with making movies. And it was crystal clear to me, but yeah, it was strange. I remember having just like a lot of friends, around that age. If you're watching this and you're, especially if you're in high school, or if you just graduated, or maybe you just started college and you're just not quite sure like what the heck to do, like that's 100% normal. Like, but I remember at the time, for me, it wasn't so much what I wanted to do, but it was more about how am I going to make that work? Because, this was in Michigan, and I just didn't have the money or resources or access to the industry at all. And, I had to get a job and, and work and save money, and just, it took me, I think, a lot longer to, at least get to a point where I, could make a living doing this. But also the internet was nowhere near what it is now, and I think some of the best advice I can give, I can only speak for, what has worked for me. And I guess the best advice would be, if you, I would probably say intern, or be an assistant. That really, it sounds crazy. And I remember being younger and thinking that was so dumb, but I mean, really to volunteer time, I guess. And I understand that kind of sucks. And, but it wasn't until I finally was around, around the people and industry that was influencing big decisions within the industry that were happening. And I just happened to be there because I wanted it so bad. I was just like, I just want to be around this. And you really got to be in it. And it's weird because now I find with a lot of young people right now, it's, you're forced to do all this virtual stuff, virtual learning and this and that. And it's like, man, hands-on is that I truly don't think I would, I don't think I would have had any sort of success in this stuff if I was forced to just do Zoom or FaceTime for everything. So that, I think that's something, for the youngsters watching, you're just getting out into the world right now. I think first of all, understand, yes, it's never been like this. It's going to take a lot of ingenuity. And if you have a passion and a drive for something, it is possible, because all the odds were against me and the deck was certainly stacked, but I didn't even consider that. It was just like, no, I am doing this. I have to do this. And really just kind of, really sacrificed everything. Which, just be prepared for the challenges and obstacles that are typically self-imposed, by making that decision. But, it's, there's a lot of sacrifice involved, in any sort of, business or enterprise that you get involved in. And in my case, with entertainment, I mean, it's brutal, but it is possible. And so, if you have the ability to intern at a studio, or, if you're interested in kind of the music business, I mean, a record label's a pretty good way to learn how it really works. It might be jarring. You might realize like, oh, wow, they just decide who is on the radio. And it's the people who just say yes to anything. But, it's, someone asked me once, they're like, we're talking about talking about having kids, and how, I said I ultimately do want children. And the conversation got to like, if you had kids and they said that they wanted to get into the music business, or entertainment, like, what would you say? And I was just like, oh, just like, yeah, that's a tough one. 'Cause I don't think I would ever, discourage my own kids from, if that's their dream, you can't, or at least I feel like you shouldn't discourage young people from following their dreams. I think I would probably direct them to videos like this, or maybe explain like, well, I have some experience there and I can tell you, how would you define success in that business? I guess that's what I would ask questions instead of just, which is what I tend to do. But, in this format, it's just me in my studio, talking to a camera alone. So, I can't really ask questions. So hopefully these ramblings are somewhat informative, because, it's, when I first started kind of doing them, I was like, am I going to have enough to talk about? And then I realized like, oh, I've never talked. So, and I have like a lifetime of, just weird things that happen, and funny stories and crazy stories, and, experiences that over 10 years of putting things on the internet, and, thousands and thousands of questions from people, certainly over, that long, that length or amount of time. And it's like, oh man, like I have years of, at least insight, and, take it or leave it. I don't claim to be, correct on any of this stuff. I'm just kind of telling the truth here about things that had an impact on me. And, really, if there's a through line with this series, it's things I wish people had told me. 'Cause it's just not something I had. I was lucky to have, mentors, along the way who were kind enough to have these sorts of conversations. But, it's few and far between. And, when I found kind of like the higher up the food chain, at least in entertainment, the more protective people tended to be about, protecting their success, because there was actually a really interesting thing I was listening to. I'll have to find the clip. I apologize, but, it just had to do with, with success and this guy was just saying basically, the, what do you say? Something along the lines of like, the lion doesn't tell, the lion doesn't tell like the smaller animals how to escape, how to get away. How to survive, and that applies to so many things. I think in this context, they were talking about, finance actually. And this is a whole other conversation, but, it's not beneficial for, let's say, the apex predator. It is not in their best interest to tell you how they maintain their dominance. Because the smaller animals, if, let's just say an antelope, to keep it in the Lion King, or gazelle, I think it was antelope they talk about in Lion King. Because if the lion tells the antelope, like, hey, like, all you got to do is, you can jump higher than me. And if you can find a place to jump higher, you'll get away and you'll survive. The lion's not going to tell the antelope that, because then the antelope's going to go tell all the other antelope, like, oh, hey, like, I just found out, like, all we have to do is, jump higher or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just making this up right now, but that's kind of how the world works, to an extent. I'm giving, this is an analogy, I guess, but, and I kind of get it, and I've seen it. Especially at like the highest levels, there's kind of this idea, you see a lot of criticism about, the idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. And, that's what I was told, to be perfectly clear. At least by, I would say, like, the older and more successful men in my life when I was younger. That was pretty much the gist of it. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And I understand why there is so much pushback on it, because when I was told that at a young age, I had 2 middle fingers in the air, and I was just like, that angered me. But I didn't have social media really to vent that anger. But it was my only option. In theory, because in my experience, for the most part, people only care about themselves, and that's just being real. And I think it's amazing, and I think it's great to envision a world where that's not true. And I know a lot of people, myself included, who have actively taken steps to at least try to make things better for everyone. Even if it's small things, if there's not a whole lot that I feel like I I'm capable of, but the little things I can do, even if it's just one of these videos and someone out there got inspired to like, challenge themselves to go for it and work 10 times harder, write 10 more songs, record 10 more songs, whatever it is, whatever the reason is for people even watching this. But I think it was a real rude awakening as someone who was, someone who has always considered myself like pretty progressive in all walks of life. And then kind of going to like the hub, at least in the US, of where all of the progressive kind of thinking people went, Hollywood, where everyone likes to get up when they're winning their award and talk about, we got to change this and we got to do this. But then you kind of start to meet those people and you see them behind closed doors. And it was just always real weird to me, especially meeting people who are, talking about all of these issues, open borders and all that stuff. And, you got to dial a code to get through the gate, the wall that they built around their home. And I think I saw enough of that to realize like, oh, this is a charade. And I've personally been shamed and criticized and everything in life, or everything now that in life that you're supposed to use your platform, as if that's going to make any difference, because it's like, nah, I know people with millions of followers, and if you knew how many firearms in their house they had, you would be completely blown away. But if you look at their, Twitter feed or what they post on social media, you would think a very different thing. And, more power to them. I get it. But the reason I bring that up is because it's like, that's just a glaring example of like, if it helps them get ahead, they'll do it, even if they don't believe it. And as I've kind of exited that, and for the first time, though I've had a considerable community around the things that I've made, I never appreciated it until very recently, if I'm being completely honest. I took everyone for granted because I was one of those, when I was so caught up in it and still in it, doing the whole ladder climbing, it became numbers. And I think, I'm not trying to excuse my own guilt in that, because I've internalized that and come to an understanding. And, it's a big reason why I started making these in the first place. Cause I'm like, no, I want to let people know that I do care. And to be very real and be like, I used to not, and no one around me did either. And I think that's a big part why. And I went through some craziness and realized there were still people there. And they've been here for a long time. And you know what? it's about time that I let them know the truth, and let them know what's real, and that's kind of just all there is to it. Yeah, this was kind of all over the place again. Everyone, I don't have notes, or I honestly don't even really think about what I'm going to talk about. I just kind of talk, and these ideas, they just kind of they're all over the place. But I hope that there's something here that is useful. It's an interesting thing, isn't it? This life that we live. It is very strange indeed. Well, there you have it. Sorry, it got a little weird there, but it's life. Life is weird, and I think sometimes you got to talk about those things because we need to pull ourselves out of this, the fakeness. There's just too much of it. I suppose it's always been there. But what are you going to do? We're going to keep on keeping on and do whatever we can to at least, move forward in a positive way and keep creating. Because that's where it's at. I tested out a new kind of system, a new kind of video series, I guess. Almost like tutorials, but just to kind of show how I make like songs. And it's kind of been tricky. I'm figuring out like how I want to light it and how I want to set the cameras up and everything, but I'm pretty much there. Maybe next week I'll drop the first one. They're a little bit, kind of the way I'm going to do them, there's a little bit more kind of involved, but they'll be shorter and kind of more concise, and I think it'll give some pretty cool insight. So hopefully that'll be helpful. So anyway, that is going to do it for today's episode. And I believe we'll say watch Napoleon Dynamite if you haven't seen it, or maybe watch it again. Pretty silly stuff going on there. And music, I'm not mad about this new Billie Eilish record. The video that she just put out, they should have done a little bit better on the CGI, but I think the song's great, and I'm happy that with her her audience and her voice, and she has an undeniable influence on the direction music, at least pop music, is going. And I was very happy to hear just an acoustic and a vocal, and it was very pretty. So yeah, good stuff, Billy. And well, I think that's about it. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed and you just watched this whole thing, click the button and the bell, subscribe. If you'd like to join, click the join button. You get an extra hour every Friday. Shout out to all of the members. Love you guys. I love all you very much. And I also love the non-members. I just don't get to see the non-members or communicate as much because we have a whole kind of community tab, and the badges help me to see who is a member, and I try to respond to all of those comments as well. So yeah, consider becoming a member. That's fun stuff. And members, we'll see you Friday. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. And I think I'm going to chop some more of these up into little clips because I'm realizing sometimes you just want to watch a quick video, and these aren't usually time-stamped. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you, and we'll see you next week. Peace and love, high fives and hugs, and drink lots of water, and we'll see you soon.